All right.
Great. We're going to give everybody another minute or so. Though we do have a quorum, but I know that Mike Dungus and Paul White also plan to. There's Paul.
Yes, I am here. Sorry.
All righty. Jen, you want to go ahead and get started? I'll kick us off. Okay. All right. Good morning, everybody. I'm calling this meeting of the Public Safety Communications Task Force to order. It is 11:16 on January 8, 2025, and I'm Barbara Neal. As a reminder, the meeting's being recorded. The recording will be posted on the task force webpage following the meeting. We'll start with the roll call. If you could verbally acknowledge your presence when I call your name. Oops. Not sure where that is coming from.
I didn't hear it.
Oh, hold on just one second. Sorry, that's me. I had something running in the background. Roll call. Jen Morrison.
I'm here.
Paul White.
I'm here.
Michael Wright.
I am here.
Ron Kumitz.
I am here.
Jim Mack.
Here.
And I do not see Mike Dungus yet, but he did say he'd be here, so he may join later. Also joining us is Emily Mullaney as our administrative support, and our project management team, Rick and Dom from Televate. And from Mission Critical, it looks like we have Jason Malloy, Phil Sisk, and Bonnie Maney. Welcome, everybody. I do not see any members of the public present, so we will move on to approval of the agenda. The agenda was distributed to task force members by email. It's also available on the web page. Do task force members have any proposed changes to the agenda? Hearing nothing, we'll consider the agenda approved and move on to approval of the minutes. These would be the minutes from the December 18th regular meeting number 41. Are there any changes needed to the minutes? And if not, is there a motion to approve those minutes?
I will make that motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Ron.
Second.
Second, I think that was Jim. Okay, any discussion? All right, we'll move to a vote. I'm going to abstain from the vote as I wasn't at that meeting and I haven't watched all of the recording. So those in favor of approving the minutes, please raise your hand or indicate by saying aye. I see Jen.
Aye.
I hear Ron, Paul,
Aye.
Michael, and Jim. So the minutes are approved from December 18th. Public comment is next, and I do see that a member of the public has joined us. Bob Schlachter, would you like to introduce yourself first? And you're welcome to offer any public comment you may have this morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My name is Bob Schlachter. I'm president of Rutland County Fire Mutual Aid Association down in Rutland. We utilize state dispatch services quite a bit down here. I think we're one of the biggest users of the service currently. And I'm interested in sitting in on these meetings. I was on the original task force working group, and I'd like to keep in touch with what's happening here. So if it's okay, I'll monitor from the side here.
Sure, certainly okay. Glad you could join us.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on then. I'm just double checking, make sure we don't have anyone else from the public, and we do not. Okay, moving on to project updates. Dom, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Barb, and Happy New Year to everyone. Many of you know our focus over the last few weeks has been primarily on the reports for the project, report deliverables, both the inventory and assessment report, and also development of the system planning report. The inventory and assessment report has gone through review and a comment period. The comments have been addressed by MCP. They have updated the document, and it is ready now for distribution to the individual dispatch centers. The plan for that report at this point is to actually break it up into the individual sections. So each dispatch center will receive the introductory sections, I believe sections 1, 2, and 3, to give them context, of course, for the report, and then their individual section that assesses the specific capabilities and current situation in their dispatch center. They will have that to review to confirm the data is accurate, and also there are some areas where we have gaps in the data. Hopefully they will be able to fill that in. So that will be going on. Maybe Jason can give an update as to when those are being sent out, but hopefully this week, and we'll be getting back updates and incorporating those. In parallel, MCP has been working heavily on the system planning report, which is the major, final report deliverable of the project. We have that scheduled for a first draft this week, on the 10th, Friday. We have scheduled the first draft of that report, which will be available then for task force review and comment. I assume we're going to make that available in a similar fashion that we did the inventory and assessment report, so that it will be a link will be provided where task force members can go online and review that and provide comments via a comment sheet. Our intent is to incorporate those initial comments, get a second draft towards the end of January, which we can distribute for further review from a broader selection of stakeholders as well as the public. In addition to those activities, we have completed, I think we reported last time, completed all the workshops with the exception of the funding workshop, which we have been waiting until we have some budgetary numbers that we can communicate to the funding group. We should have those soon with the draft report. So that's something that actually we need to schedule, and maybe we can have discussion later during this meeting as to when best to schedule that meeting. So a lot of activity going on. I think that summarizes the majority of it. Again, happy to answer any questions from task force members.
Dom, I would just point out the enormous lift that the last 6 weeks has been for MCP and the amount of effort they've put forth in meeting the deadlines that we've had. I also want to give a shout out to task force members who have reviewed the very preliminary first round drafts of items, and the inventory report becoming to this place where it's now going back to individual agencies, mostly for fact checking, right? And then
Right.
Coming back represents getting really close to the end of a massive chunk of the work of this task force, the inventory and associated companion documents. And then separately, getting to the place of having a draft that is worthy of sharing publicly of the system design report is just an enormous amount of work, and not sort of foot stomping the magnitude of work that's been happening here since just before Thanksgiving and into the new year, I feel would be remiss. So thank you, everyone, team, MCP, Televate, and task force members for really keeping this a top priority and striving to push forward on the timeline we're shooting for.
Absolutely. Echo those comments, Jan. Thank you.
definitely.
Thank you. We definitely
Okay.
appreciate that. One thing to clarify real quick, as far as the funding numbers, um, some of those numbers are going to come as a result of that funding workshop. So that workshop is going to help directly drive some of those numbers. So while there may be some budgetary information in the document forthcoming, it's not going to be everything, because as I said, we need that funding workshop to help drive some of that.
Okay, so
Yep.
it sounds like a priority to get that on the books then. So why don't we take that up in new business here in just a minute? Any other questions for Televate? Okay, and Jason, did Televate cover everything you would like to hear covered in the project updates, or do you have anything to add?
Dom, what did you mention that you needed clarification from me? I apologize. I have a contractor doing some repair work today, and they kind of the volume dropped out.
That was regarding the distribution of the portions of the inventory report to the individual dispatch centers. Is that likely? Are those likely to be distributed this week?
For the inventory, yeah, we need to create the specific review worksheet for each one of those, and
Right.
when that is completed, we'll be able to send those out. And as was previously discussed, the email that goes out to them will include instructions that the first couple of sections are for their review, but not necessarily for changes, just more for their information.
Okay,
Jason, what turnaround time are you going to give them?
Given the response that we got initially, I've been on the fence about that. I have been thinking about that. We certainly don't want to drag it out too long. My thought was potentially maybe a 2-week turnaround. What's the task force desire on that? I certainly, between a week and 2 weeks has been my thought. Certainly no more than 2 weeks, but
I think maybe
I'll certainly take input.
maybe 2 weeks with a 1-week reminder halfway through.
Yep, that sounds great. If you give them more than 2 weeks, it signals that it's not urgent.
Correct.
But if you
Correct.
give them less than 2 weeks, it's like, how do we triage this into the list
Impossible.
of current
Yep.
fires?
Right.
So
Okay.
I like that, Paul, the reminder at the 1-week mark.
great. Okay. Anything else on project updates? Excellent.
I think that we should move it to new business, but it's related to what the updates were. So when we get to new business, I think we should talk about what's going to be the strategy to receive feedback once the draft of the system design report is released for public consumption. We need to start thinking about how we're going to capture the input and what types of convenings and, facilitated discussions we're going to host.
Okay, that sounds good. We are at new business now, so I added a note there, but I wonder if maybe we should start with the funding workshop scheduling and then move on to yours. And then I have one item and perhaps there are others. So, so let's start with the funding workshop scheduling. I do not have it in front of me, but I believe we had created a list of potential participants. And what are we thinking, like within the next 2 weeks, or I'm throwing it out there for thoughts?
Don't we have to wait until we have a first draft of system design so we know the potential magnitude of what they're trying to determine funding for? Like, if we just ask them to go in blind, how are we
Yeah.
gonna pay for this? And they don't have any sense of, small, medium, large. I'm not sure they're gonna know how to be responsive to the request. So my thought, and I'd love to hear what others think, is that two things. One, my initial list has changed considerably based on the November elections, and we won't know committee assignments until tonight or tomorrow. So we'll have to rework this list. Two, that once we know the date of public release of the draft of the system design, that we give about a week after that date, we schedule a funding workshop that will have given people who are invited to the workshop that week to review the draft.
When is the public, we're talking about the system planning report. When is the public system planning report due?
31st, I think. 31st of
31st.
January. Is that right, Dom and Rick?
Yes, that's correct, the 31st.
So Jason had mentioned that there may be some discussion of funding in that draft, but that they were expecting input from the workshop as well. So based on that, what would be, I mean, is
Oh,
there
wait.
information that we could share with the workshop ahead of the public release that might support or give support to MCP's work to finalize that section?
Yeah, that's a great point. If they're looking for input from that group, then we obviously have to host it before the 31st.
Jason, maybe you can clarify, but I thought, at least in the wireless section, and I know, I believe Scott's team is trying to put together cost estimates, or budgetary cost estimates currently based on their various options for wireless systems. So hopefully we would have some information there.
Yeah. So for example, we'll have some of that information. We'll also be, I'm in touch with the head of our automated systems team, our CAD team, so that we can, maybe put together some budgetary numbers there. But looking at, for example, and Bonnie, correct me if I'm wrong, but when we start talking about things like the merging of centers or state fees, wireless fees, et cetera, those are some of the things that we would need to get input from the stakeholder group, from the public groups to be able to really build out that section fully. Bonnie, do you have anything to add or clarify there?
Yeah, that's actually right, because when we don't know, there's so many variables, right, at this point, that we can really identify some things that are more labor and oriented than rather hard costs. But when we're talking about existing 34 communication centers or potential mergers, what those regions could look like, who would, where even some of that funding could come from, who would actually ultimately be the I don't want to say the players, but those that would want to merge versus those that would want to stay independent. Those are a lot harder costs to, I mean, there's just so many configurations of what that could be. So those are conversations that we want to have, and I would look at this in many cases more of a ROM until a path is determined. Once a path is determined, or the options, and I know that some of the task force members, you know, as we work through, you've seen some of those options. Then you can start to refine a cost much more. And the cost today is going to be different, much different than a cost 5 years or 7 years or 10 years down the road when some of these things could take place. So there are so many variables. I just want to kind of set expectations. It's not like this would be a line item, you know, on that you would get, you know, with a contractor on a facility build. So, and where those funds could come from and when funds could be available down the road that may not be available today. So yeah, there's just a lot of variables. So I know we have another conversation coming up as we get set to bring things together for Friday. And these are some of the things we probably need to talk about.
Well, I guess what I'm looking for, and I think Barb, we might be of a like mind on this. How can we help in advance of the January 31st draft? How can we help get you the information that you need to get as far down the road as you feel you should be in that first draft on possible ways to fund the preferred future? And it might be the case that we can't convene an actual workshop of subject matter experts until we know what we're trying to build.
Mm-hmm.
But are there a couple people that we could point you to talk about how might these be funded? What are things we should know, so that you can put some level of detail in that draft? And if the answer is no, you just can't talk about funding till you know what you're building, then that's understandable in my book. I'd love to hear from
Yeah.
other task force members, but I want to make sure that we're helping and providing subject matter experts to you to the degree you think you can use them before this January 31st first draft comes out.
Sure. And
So-
before you, oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Bonnie. I
No,
was
you're
just
fine.
gonna say, my understanding was that there would be funding mechanisms I'm sorry, maybe costs or potential costs identified for each of the options that are being presented. Understanding that they would be general, right? They're the devil's in the details on how that would really play out. So will that be part of the first draft that comes out? I think that's my expectation anyway. Yes, okay.
So,
Go
well,
ahead,
so let me
Bonnie.
give you an example. I think one that immediately comes to mind, and I know we've had discussion about it as part of the inventory report and such as well, is the example of the cost of the current staff, the number of staff, right? We know what that general number is, right? For the 217 existing equivalent, which is, I think, about 19 million is being spent on staff estimate at this point, statewide. Now that compared to when we calculate out the potential staffing numbers for if we do a reduction for the options for the reduction in communication centers, those options, those four, those are numbers that we'll be able to present. We know this is a cost. We know this could be a future state 1, 2, 3, 4 options for a change in the number of staff, right? And we can show the delta there. If you did, this is the current expense. If you did this, this would be reducing that number. This would be reducing that number. And through those savings, you could see a potential path and a funding source to get to a future state, somewhere along that continuum. Those types of things we can. To say, and Jason, as he mentioned, another example would be, you know, estimates on what would a CAD look like. Again, future state 37, but you know, we don't know then what the other options for mergers would look like, right? So seat licenses, things like that. We'll be able to give a general number, but like you just said, Barb, the devil's in the details. How would it ultimately play out? I know Scott's doing his, but we want to talk, I think, about where we find inefficiencies, duplication of effort, duplication of funding, as those as also potential sources for funding beyond whatever else could be, supported, and what those options could be. Does that make sense?
That helps. Yep.
And you're going to be able to see, because we've had budget information, we may be able to do something here as well, of like we have budget information from a majority of the communication centers today. So perhaps, again, if said these three centers over here just hypothetically decided that they were going to merge and be, a regional center, we know what their existing budgets are and what that could potentially be in duplication of effort or reduction in those costs, network costs potentially. I think that's something we would need to know, like what are the costs that the state perhaps is paying already, and get more granular. I don't think we can get as granular yet to say, well, what would be the savings in network costs and things like that. But we can show that their budgets, even if they need to keep on staff for walk-up windows or other ancillary duties, jail duties, that kind of thing, that a large portion of their budgets that the municipalities are currently spending could be, spent elsewhere and at a more efficient cost. Not even to talk about in that the saving in like reduction in call transfers and things like that, where you really can't put, I wouldn't say you can't put a monetary value to those. They are a time savings, but there is that element as well. We want to talk about there's a lot of funding and cost discussions. Cost sharing is another piece. We want to kind of lay out options, cost sharing elements in there. But there's operational efficiencies that we want to focus on as well.
All of that makes sense. I just want to make sure that we are providing you with the resources you need to complete the
Yes.
scope of work required. So please
Yeah.
just let us know if you want to be connected to some people who might have knowledge that this task force doesn't have about potential ways of funding a future. And then
Even
when you're
get-
ready, for that workshop, let us know.
Yeah. Okay. I think we'll have a better understanding of that once you guys get your first eyes on the draft, and then maybe some part the following week or the beginning of the next week, and have that to be able to kind of just a group to talk about that section itself.
May I chime in?
Yes.
So I put the initial list of potential invitees to the funding workshop in the chat. So I went back over emails, and that was the final list. And obviously, some of those members are no longer with the legislature, and we hadn't been finalized, but we did have an initial list, and so it's in the chat, and we can work from that, as well as any special requests that Bonnie may make of the task force. Another thought based on what Bonnie just said is that certainly assumptions are going to be required underlying the funding analysis and the cost analysis. And so, those assumptions, I'd recommend that, Bonnie and her team, put those assumptions and we discuss those to ensure that they, that they're rational and defensible and make sense. And so, whatever costs, and that those assumptions are going to come not just from staffing, but integrate regionalization and what savings you have in one center or what investment you have to make in expanding centers. There's a lot of moving parts here, and so whatever our assumptions are, whatever the underlying assumptions are for the radio network and for backhaul, and so for all the elements, those assumptions are going to be important because we can't predict the future, but rational understanding of what it might be. And so underlying assumptions make sense to be presented as part of our discussion, ongoing discussion on the advancement of the report, in my opinion.
Okay, so where are we leaving this? It sounds to me, if I've processed all this accurately, that we are going to wait for the first draft of the system planning report, which is expected on Friday, and then discuss with Mission Critical and Mission Critical, what additional resources they need, right, to get more fine tuning perhaps in the report. So we'll get the draft and we'll circle back. Is that where we're leaving it?
With the caveat that if in the preparation of that draft, MCP feels there would be benefit to talking to some subject matter experts, we will connect them to people
Got
who
it.
we think might be useful.
Okay.
Barb, I guess
Paul, yeah.
I think, I don't think I was present at the meeting where this, thank you, Rick, for posting that list in the chat. I don't think I was present at the meeting where that list was compiled. And I'm just trying to think of what the people in that list are going to contribute in a workshop. I mean, if we think that they're going to tell us how to pay for this, I think we're going to be waiting a long time for that input. Like they are waiting on the task force to tell them how to pay for it. I'm just not sure what's the type of question and answers that we hope to get out of the workshop with this group of people.
So the thought was that these are people from across state government who have had experience in funding or finding funding for large scale statewide projects like broadband rollout. Obviously, the Department of Financial Regulation has a lot of insight into various different aspects, including taxes. The treasurer has a piece of
Right.
visibility into this. So it was really just meant to be a broad swath of people who have insight into how government can and can't work and what some fruitful paths forward would be, rather than stubbing our toe on a rock that has already been, you know, an obstacle in state government over the past decade.
Okay.
So
I
we
just
could lay out the high level cost areas, right? Talking with a group like that could then help us put together a list of funding, almost not a high level funding strategy of like, here's possible options that could be able to, you know, address each of the different areas. And then those obviously at further down the road, as paths are determined, would have to be, you know, assessed and analyzed in more detail. But having I think as you just said, Barb, I'm sorry, Jen, that what are possible options? What are possible funding sources? Things that have worked in the past that, and particular to Vermont and elsewhere, and those experiences could help lay out some of those areas for a future funding strategy with more detail.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, I can see the value of the members of the administration that are in the list, but looking at the list of legislators, I think if the members of the legislature had an idea of how to pay for this, I think they would have already done it without forming two different working groups. But maybe I'm just jaded.
I mean, in short term, obviously, the Joint Fiscal Office, which would include Adam Gresham, would be the place to start if you needed an immediate go-to. And we can talk about this and provide whatever resources you feel help inform your work.
Okay, so we'll wait for feedback on that. It sounds to me like we're going to leave this discussion for right now and pick it back up once the first draft is out. Is that where we are? Hey. Okay. Moving on then Jen, your suggestion for new business was to talk about a strategy for receiving feedback on the system planning public draft, which is expected at the end of January. Did you have ideas you wanted to start off with, or do you want to just open it up?
Just open it up.
It is opened. What do people think? I think, did we, let me start with this. Did we set in the timeline a specific amount of time for public review? I think that's probably
Yes,
Dom would have the answer to
Yes.
that. Yeah.
Yes, I'm checking that. I think it was about 3 weeks, we were saying, end of January, January 31st. We said February 1st through 21st is what we had targeted for the public comment period.
My first thought, I'll throw it out there, was like 3, maybe, virtual, I'll call them listening sessions or public, opportunities for the public to comment. I don't know, that's one idea.
Yes,
do
and
other-
I think we have to provide multiple venues for feedback.
Yep.
Like publicizing our inbox and monitoring our inbox daily. Maybe even posting an online form on our website where people can just click on a fillable form or something.
Ah, okay, that's a good idea. And along with the 3 virtual sessions, perhaps? Is 3 too many, or?
No, I don't think so, but I'd love to hear what other task force members think. I mean, we definitely want to have public sessions and we might get overrun at those and need to add more. I don't know.
I guess I would think you'd have to go back to the regional, just like what we did previously, do it that same concept of regional meetings. You're going to capture that most of the same audience that was interested in that, and maybe some others that now that we're actually coming out with meaningful data, might gather some more. So I don't think that was too heavy of a lift for everyone. We all kind of broke up and did that regionally, and I think that worked. And we have all the infrastructure, and maybe we can tweak on some of the technology side of things, but that's a good start, I think.
So, one of the things that I wanted to bring up is that I've been talking to some people in the fire service, and it appears that, part of this problem that we're going to have is people don't actually understand or have not completely read the instructions. An example of this is that I was approached by someone who went to one of the county mutual aid group meetings, and some of the people there were upset because their agencies had not been surveyed about dispatching, yet the dispatching, and I put that in air quotes and that kind of thing, that they do consists of sending the oldest guy in the fire department down to the station after their tones have gone out and the trucks have rolled out. And somewhere along the line, they feel that that's dispatching. And so I think what we're going to get to is that we have these huge documents, and it's hard enough to get anybody to open their various new appliances and read the single page, what if you don't want to read the instruction book piece of paper. So we're going to get people who do show up who haven't read the whole thing, and we're going to be doing a tutorial on what this all means. And I know that no one in this room is old enough to remember Ross Perot, but I think that we need some of those Ross Perot charts and graphs to summarize some of this information so that the people who don't want to read the entire document will have some idea what's in those documents.
So we need a quick start guide.
Right, we need the
Yes.
quick start guide.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I said
Yeah,
this
that's a good
back,
idea.
back when we were first scheduling the various town halls and listening sessions and whatever all we held. I mean, I said it then and I'll say it again now. I don't, with a couple of exceptions, I don't think we're going to get much in terms of participation from true members of the general public. Most of what we're going to hear from are better categorized as stakeholders.
This is Bonnie. I think something that MCP can help with, and when we get to that point, is to help develop maybe some one-pager, those quick start guides that can speak to the, the current challenges, the current challenges of the future state and the benefits of, various future state models. And, some different one pagers to, kind of speak specifically to the different potential audiences, whether they be community or, stakeholders, as you said, Paul. Help really kind of summarize and condense the key areas of focus that we want to present.
I'm curious what the group thinks about wash, rinse, and repeat of the first round, the 4 regional for town halls intended for stakeholders who work within the system, and then virtual public meetings where anyone can chime in, and then augment that with maybe repeatedly publicized ability to either email us in our inbox or go to our website and fill out a form, a PDF fillable form.
If we have the time to squeeze all that in, I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we certainly need to give the stakeholders a safe space to have this discussion without them, subjected to the ire of the various disgruntled taxpayers who just got their bill for, the school taxes and now want to take it out on the fire department and the EMS people and whoever else they can. We need to build a system that works for them, and we need to figure out how to fund it. And the two at some point are, at some point you need to decide which dishwasher you want, and then you figure out where to get the money from. We need to make sure that people can tell us what works and what doesn't work without feeling that by simply saying no, that doesn't work, it's going to cost more to do that they're not going to be in the sites.
Okay, so I'm hearing MCP is going to help us develop, or they are going to develop for us, might be a better way to say it, the quick start guides. I like the idea of the 4 regional stakeholders meetings, the town halls essentially like we had before. I think Paul and Jen agreed with that too. What do other task force members think? That's a good idea? But actually, Michael brought that up first.
Mhm.
Okay. Then two like virtual public listening sessions, if you will, and then the open email and the website form or what have you to get information back. Is that what we should run with to get planned?
Sounds like a pretty comprehensive approach.
Right, Don, make all that happen. No. Well, we can
I'm
talk
on it.
about that in our offline meetings, the
Yeah.
nitty gritty details of that. Okay. Okay, it looks like Jen had to drop off. So we will run with this. Does anybody, task force, have anything else to add on the stakeholder feedback and public feedback strategy?
I just want to, echo what Ron said. I think the idea that those working in the system have a safe space to have that conversation is so critical, because we saw how well that worked at some of these other meetings, and they're the ones who are gonna, they see the nitty gritty of how this flows, where the public's got a slightly different perspective, and I think they need to be heard individually. So Dominic, however you structure that, I think that's really key, that we give them that space.
Okay. Sounds good. Anything else on this topic? Okay, the other new business item I had is, I believe we have a report due to the legislature on the 15th is what Act 78 states, and I forget specifically what we're reporting back on, if it's the inventory report or something more than that. So does anyone know offhand what was due on the 15th?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay, well, why don't we leave it at this? I will double check what was due on the 15th, and if we have it, we'll deliver it. If we don't, we can have conversations with the chairs of the committees that we were to report to, and or send them some type of memo that gives them an update of where things are and when they can expect whatever it was that was due. Does that make sense?
Yeah, certainly if there's something specific, we can create that. Obviously, we have the monthly stakeholder updates that we've been putting together. We'll work on the one for January. I don't know if that, I need to check, as you do, Barb, as to what specifically they're asking for, but
Yeah,
maybe
okay.
those types of things we'll cover.
Okay, good. Well, we can work on that then between now and next week.
Yes.
Okay, is there anything else for new business? All right. Then next up on the agenda is to confirm the next meeting date, which is on the schedule for next Wednesday, January 15th, which will get us back on our regular 2-week cadence. So we will revisit all of this with appropriate updates again next week. And if there's nothing else, I would look for a motion to adjourn.
I'll move we
So
adjourn.
move.
Thanks,
I'll
Paul.
second that.
Second.
Thanks, Ron. All right. All in favor of adjourning, raise your hand. Or signify by saying aye.
Aye.
See, and or hear. All task force members are in agreement. So we are adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody, and we'll talk to you all next week.
Great. Thanks.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
we-
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy.